I now call to order the Society's 2,472nd meeting in what is now the 151st year since its founding on March 13th, 1871. Good evening, everyone. My name is Larry Milstein. As many of you know, I am the president of PSW, one of the oldest scientific societies of Washington, D.C., committed to providing a forum to further scientific understanding and inquiry. Welcome to our members, guests, and friends, including everyone here in the Powell Auditorium at the Cosmos Club, and everyone tuning in on whichever of these is working, Zoom and or YouTube, to tonight's lecture by Richard Hansen. The Society is grateful to the sponsors of the 2022-2023 full-year lecture series, PSW Mike Helton and Helton Associates, LLC, and the Policy Studies Organization in cooperation with the American Public University. We are also grateful to the PSW Spring Lecture Series sponsor, PSW member Tim Thomas. And we are grateful to the sponsor of tonight's lecture, PSW member John Downing. Please join me in giving them all a round of appreciation. In brief, as mentioned at several of our previous meetings, the Society has begun a fundraising campaign to ensure that it will be able to meet expenses in the coming years without having to reduce the number of meetings and lectures and without having to spend down its reserves. We all face inflationary prices, and we have been hit with fourfold increase for our use of Cosmos Club facilities. So if you can, please give us whatever you can give. And if you're interested in sponsoring a lecture or a fall or spring lecture series or a full year lecture series, or you want to endow the Society, we will be very grateful to hear from you. Please see me or see our corresponding secretary at the back of the room. I am pleased to announce the following new members: Ludmila Kolakolova, Principal Research Scientist in Astrophysics at the University of Maryland, graduate of the Main Astronomical Observatory of the Ukrainian Academy of Sciences, interested in astronomy, space science, and computer science, who earned a PSW from a colleague. Donald Kynes of Sherwin-Williams, interested in cosmology, astrobiology, origin of life, human evolution, who learned a PSW from the PSW YouTube channel and says, I quote, "Love the high quality of the lectures and wanted to help out a little financially," for which, Donald, thank you. A.C. Charania, Chief Technologist at NASA. I think you're here in the front row. Interested in aerospace, aviation, space exploration, and planetary defense, who learned a PSW from attending a lecture. Edward Webman, a biomedical engineer with the FDA, interested in cosmology, who earned a PSW from a mention in a column in the Washington Post. David Siegel, Director, Surface Imagery at Design Techs, interested in theoretical physics, neuroscience, information theory, astrophysics, and linguistics, who earned a PSW from a podcast by upcoming speaker Sean Carroll. I had no idea he was podcasting about us. I'm happy to learn that. And tonight's speaker, Richard Hansen, who learned a PSW from our invitation to him to speak here tonight, and whose interests will be clear, I think, in large measure from tonight's lecture. We welcome them all to membership. If you are not a member and would like to join PSW or support the organization, you can do so through the PSW website using the blue Join button on the upper right-hand corner of the homepage. We welcome new members and we appreciate donations. Recording Secretary Camille Lance will now read the minutes of the 2,471st meeting and the lecture by Thomas Zurbuchen and Nadia Drake on NASA's Search for Life in the Cosmos. Thank you, Cameo.
Thank you, Larry. On February 3rd, 2023, from Powell Auditorium of the Cosmos Club in Washington, D.C., and by Zoom webinar broadcast on the PSW Science YouTube channel, President Larry Milstein called together the 2,471st lecture of the Society to order at 8:02 p.m. He welcomed new members, and the recording secretary read the minutes of the previous meeting. President Milstein then introduced the speakers for the evening. Thomas Zurbuchen, retired director of the Science Mission Directorate at NASA, and Nadia Drake, a science journalist. Their lecture was titled Whispers from Other Worlds, NASA's Search for Life in the Cosmos. Zurbuchen began by introducing his co-speaker as the daughter of Frank Drake of the Drake equation, and commenting that he and Nadia will tell the story about life in the universe like nobody else can. Specifically, the two speakers would tell the stories in parallel. The first story of the history of imagining life in the universe, and the second would be of current efforts and progress which NASA has achieved. The two speakers explained their personal motivations to understanding whether there is life in the universe. Nadia then described how her father came to identify the second factors in the Drake equation. The Drake equation calculates the number of detectable civilizations in the Milky Way galaxy. The first factor in the Drake equation, Nadia explained, is the average rate of star formation. This value was the only known value at the time her father developed the equation in 1961. The following two factors are the fraction of those stars with planets and the average number of those planets that may develop an ecosystem. In the past 2 decades, the Kepler mission enabled scientists to determine that on average, every star has at least one planet orbiting it, making that factor 1. Nadia then went on to discuss the next two factors, the third being the average number of habitable planets per planetary system, and the fourth being the fraction of those planets that succeed in developing life. She then commented on biosignatures and how they would be used in the identification of the fourth factor. Zurbuchen then went on to describe the bulk of NASA's science missions and programs which are focused on figuring out the value of this fourth variable. He began by introducing the Viking missions as 2 missions which orbited and landed on Mars. Then he discussed the addition of language into NASA's authorization law in 2017, which legally obligated NASA to search for life's origins, evolution, distribution, and the future of life in the universe. Next, Zurbuchen reviewed through the ladder of life detection and discussed experiments for exoplanet identification, experiments to identify life on icy bodies, and experiments to identify life on Mars. Nadia then reviewed the 5th and 6th factors of the Drake equation, which are the fraction of those planets with life that developed intelligent life, and the fraction of those planets with intelligent life that develop interstellar communication. SETI, she explains, has a $100 million 10-year search for radio techno-signatures called the Breakthrough Listen in order to assist with solving for these two factors. Zurbuchen then went on to discuss this initiative and reviewed different funding mechanisms, both inside and outside of the federal government, for doing such research. Nadia reviewed the last factor, which is the average length of time such civilizations survive and continue to send communications. She confessed that her father was bothered by this factor because it was least knowable of all the factors. She gave Earth as an example and explained that we have only been detectable since the early 1900s, when the military began using radar. Zurbuchen and Nadia closed by asking one another questions. Zurbuchen asked Nadia what the current number for the Drake equation is. She responded that her father liked to say the answer is somewhere between 1 and a billion, and roughly 10,000. Nadia asked Zurbuchen what it meant to him if life were to be detected outside of Earth. He responded that it would be a profound change in not only how we look at nature, but look at ourselves. Next, the question-answer period began. One of the members asked if it is worthwhile to look for techno-signatures within our stellar neighborhood. Nadia answered that existing instruments can look into this area for no extra charge. Zurbuchen adds that he cannot imagine a scenario in which it's a bad investment. Another member asked about what the most promising upcoming missions are for solving and figuring out the value of these factors. Zurbuchen responded that he believes James Webb Space Telescope is going to be promising because it is incredibly powerful. After the question and answer period, President Milstein thanked the speaker, made the usual housekeeping announcements, and invited guests to join the society. President Milstein adjourned the meeting at 10:19 p.m. The temperature in Washington, D.C. was 22 degrees Celsius. The weather was partly cloudy. The attendance in person was 98, with a concurrent live stream viewership of 70 for a total live viewership of 168. And the number of online viewers in the first 2 weeks of posting was 808. Respectfully submitted, Cameo Lance, Recording Secretary.
Thank you, Cameo. Are there any comments on the minutes? Any corrections? Any additions? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion from a member to accept the minutes as read. A second. All members in favor? All opposed? Hearing none, the minutes are accepted unanimously as read, subject to any additional comments that may come in electronically and require any modification. They will be posted to the website in due course. And we now turn to tonight's lecture by Richard Hansen on Mayan civilization in northern Guatemala, an extensive civilization revealed with extraordinary LiDAR technology. Richard is founder and president of the Foundation for Anthropological Research and Environmental Studies, FARES, and director of the Mirador Basin Project in northern Guatemala, and affiliate research professor at Idaho State University, among other things. His research has identified some of the largest and earliest ancient cities of Central America and has made important contributions to our understanding of the history of Mayan civilization. His work and conservation programs have been crucial in the conservation and protection of 810,000 acres of tropical forest in Guatemala. He is an author on numerous publications, including 3 books and around 200 papers and book chapters in scientific and popular publications. His work has been featured as well in more than 36 film documentaries, and he served as principal consultant for Mel Gibson's movie Apocalypto, as well as participating with Morgan Freeman in National Geographic's The Story of God. He is the recipient of too many honors and awards to mention. I'll just say that he has received the highest awards, civilian awards of the Guatemalan government, and an Idaho State University Achievement Award. He earned a BS in Spanish and archaeologist and an MS in anthropology at Brigham Young University and a PhD in archaeology at UCLA. And with that, all questions will be fielded after the lecture during Q&A session. And Richard, the stage is yours.
Thank you for being here tonight. It's a long weekend, and I'm grateful that you were here. It's an honor for us to be here. I'd like to introduce some important people that came here from a long ways away. My wife, Jody, is here with us. You might stand up. Jody, my daughter, Chantal, my son, Landon, his wife, Megan. These are They were all raised in tropical forests, so they know a little bit about what we're talking about tonight. I also like to pay tribute to Rodolfo Contreras, the Guatemalan attaché for culture, that's with us here tonight. Thank you, Rodolfo, for being here. John Gant, the CEO of the International Conservation Caucus, now in 28 countries in the world, and we've had the opportunity to work previously. Congressman Jerry Weller, the retired congressman from Illinois, spent decades in the House, is now also the CEO of the Maya Conservation Partnership, working to help save this area. And Glenn Doylan of National Geographic is with us tonight. Glenn, I've known Glenn for years, and we worked together, and we're working together on an article now that'll be coming out of National Geographic on this subject as we talk tonight. It's good to be here, and I appreciate that you took the time to come. We want to talk a little bit about the legacy of the Mirador-Calakmul Karst Basin. And we know that now as the cradle of Mayan civilization. And we're gonna delve in this. Not only are we going to show the reasons for the extraordinary nature of this area, but how the LiDAR technology has opened our minds and our eyes into a vast and complex society that we didn't really know before. To get the story, you have to understand that there are three principal periods of Maya history. We have 98% of all the ruins that you see in Central America or Mexico, Belize, Honduras, El Salvador, date to the post-classic or the classic periods here, from 300 AD to 900 AD, or the post-classic from 900 AD to 1511 AD. That's 98% of all the ruins. However, the pre-classic, which is down here, from 1600 BC to AD 150, is only 2% of all the sites we have in all of Mesoamerica. And it's this area that we're going to focus on tonight, since we have found extraordinary, complex societies thousands of years earlier than what we have known previously. When we look at the earliest cities of Mesoamerica, we find a nest of very early cities among the early Olmec, found in the Gulf Coast region here of the Gulf Coast of Mexico, the saddle, so to speak, of the Gulf Coast of Mexico. And then through the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, we have some very early sites along the Pacific coast of Chiapas and in Guatemala. But notice on the northern part of Guatemala, right in here is a nest of very large and very early cities that that are found in this remote area. Now, when you look at this area with a satellite and using infrared technology, it allows us to see the different types of vegetation. So what we're looking at here is a photograph published in 1992 in National Geographic magazine, in which we can see the vegetation types of the northern Petén and southern Campeche, Mexico. In fact, this blue area that you see over in here is all the type of vegetation indicative of pastures. Total deforestation. Mexico lost all of its forest in Tabasco and part of Campeche. The red that you see in through here used to be high tropical forest. Now it's been dramatically cut and lost. I'll talk about that in just a minute. But notice this patch in the middle here, this heart-shaped patch of this greenish blue color. That's another type of vegetation. It's a swamp vegetation, and that's why we call it the Mirador Basin, because the water stagnates in this area, and it creates a different type of vegetation, the dominant vegetation. And it doesn't matter what infrared image you want to use, you find the same result, the same shape of this system. And it's contained and surrounded by a series of hills. Last year we published an article in the Science magazine called Plus One, in which the geologists associated with the project revealed and showed why this is a basin. Now, by the way, there are 6 different types of basins in the world, and this is a limestone karst basin. So it's the water stagnates there. And either it's called endoric system, where the water just stays there and eventually evaporates or percolates to the ground, or it gently wends its way out to the west. But this is the shape of the system. And all the blue that you see there are those seasonal swamps that are concentrated there. The entire area is surrounded by a range of hills, 200 to 300 meters high, so that it has its own. As we look at pictures, for example, you see the picture and you see the frame, and this ridge of hills is the frame. And no matter where you are in the system, you can see that that range of hills that completely surround it on all sides. So it's a contained biological system. I'll show you that in just a minute. Now those two yellow lines that you see are the range of hills that completely surround this system. So that it's half of the basin is located in northern Guatemala. The other half is in southern Campeche, Mexico. Now, this let me back up just a second. This map was made in 2011. The sites that you see that are gold in color were like Tikal or larger. The sites that are brown are smaller than Tikal, and that was what we knew as of 2011. With the LiDAR technology we've incorporated in 2015 and 2018, these are the number of cities we have now in this area. These are not buildings, these are cities that are concentrated in this area. Notice that over here, there are no cities. And over here, there are very few. But look at the mass of concentration of large and early cities that are found in this region. Now, some of these polities we determined were part of the same system, were part of the same polity. For example, an archaeological settlement that had an internal causeway to another building was determined to be part of the same city. And so when we combine those, this 964 archaeological settlements that we have now form 417 cities in the basin. 417 ancient cities, of which we have now mapped and worked in 56 only. 56. Of 417. But nevertheless, the message is these cities are enormous. They're large and extremely early. 1,000 to 2,000 years earlier than anything else you'll see in Mexico, Belize, Honduras, or El Salvador. This pre-classic development is something that was unexpected. It's something that we have determined from 40 years of working in this area of the extraordinary development that occurred in a contained geographical sphere, in a contained geographical area. And these cities are large. Now, just that area alone has the following characteristics. The largest ancient cities in the Western Hemisphere, the largest pyramids in volume in the world, the tallest pyramids in the Americas, the earliest Maya cities, the largest concentration and unique concentrations of Maya cities, the first freeway system or superhighway system in the world. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit too. The first political state in the Americas, the cradle of Maya civilization, one of 5 founding civilizations in the world, etc., etc., etc. This is all found in the geographical borders of the system I just showed you. Now, our message is we need to save this. This is worth conserving. This is worth protecting. And this is worth defining. We'll talk about that in just a minute. As I said, this is the last intact section of rainforest left in Central America. There is no more. And these forests are pristine forests. They have all the species you would expect to find in a tropical forest. Crocodiles, jaguars, amphibians, tapirs, snakes, pumas. It's all there in abundance. And it's an extraordinary concentration of life that's there. We have the second greatest concentration of jaguars in the world. The largest now, we now determine to be in southern Bolivia and northern Paraguay, where we have the concentration of about 13 jaguars per 100 square kilometers. Here we have 11.28 jaguars per 100 square kilometers. That's a 10 by 10 kilometer area, has 11 jaguars. And these cats, we trap these cats with camera traps. So we know who they are. We know their range. We know where they patrol. And it's a fascinating insight into the majesty of these animals that are found there. The most astonishing thing is that the system can still sustain that type of feline pressure. We're not just talking about jaguars. We have the puma, we have the ocelot, we have the margay, and the jaguarundi, which are also felines found in this area that are thriving and doing well in these regions. It's a unique area because the prey is so abundant. Because of the swamps there, we have the tapir, we have the peccary, we have the deer, we have ocellated turkeys, we have the pheasant, and a whole host of other prey for these large cats that are found here in abundance. We've done a study on the insects of the Mirador Basin. We published a book on it. I just gave a book to Larry for the library here, a book on the insects of the basin. And we have 27 new species of butterflies and moths that are not found in any other part of the world. They're endemic within the confines of the basin. We have a new species of fly that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. And we have a new species of amphibians that we're finding now that only found in the confines of the basin. This is the book that we published, The Tropical Insects of the Ancient Khan Kingdom, excuse me, of Mesoamerica. And this is has the study of these insects. We've got another volume coming out shortly on this as well. We've been doing a detailed study of the vegetation in the basin. We have 6 types of tropical forest within the confines of that system. Tikal, for example, has 3 types of tropical forest. As a result, the biodiversity is much greater in this area than we had thought elsewhere. Extraordinary biodiversity and rich symbiosis between the different species as they adapt to those macro types of forests are found there. Now, archaeologically, it's even more fascinating to us because of the antiquity of these remains, the ceramics from this time period. These are Middle Preclassic ceramics dating to about 600 BC that are found in this area, 1,000 years earlier than what the stuff you see at Palenque or Copan or Quirigua or Chichen Itza. And now we have material at 1,000 BC. Extraordinary concentrations of art and depiction of their humanity at 1,000 BC as they settle in this area. These are the faces of the Maya at 1,000 BC. And of course, even we can find unique figurines. So for example, this piece here, when you exaggerate the color with a computer, we discovered that the head here was painted blue. And the red lips, so you see, notice the teeth in the mouth, the detail of this type of work is astonishing. Now, with my daughter Chantal, we uncovered these artifacts this last field season, and we can see the head on the top is Maya. But look at the plaque below, a distinct Olmec plaque from the Gulf Coast heartland of Mexico. Therefore, there was a link. Now, the Mexicans like to say that the Olmec are the mother culture of Mesoamerica. We're here to suggest another possibility, that the Olmec are a sister culture of the Maya, and that the Maya and the Olmec were emerging simultaneously in a blaze of social, political, and economic complexity. The ceramics from these early time periods are quite distinctive, and their tecomates or gourd-shaped forms of pottery, unique incisions and designs on this pottery is quite diagnostic, and we have them from sealed contexts, which has never before been found in this area. Most of the other early potteries have been mixed with later material, but this material is from sealed deposits that allow us to determine the nature of this. They were using imported strombus shells as a currency, not as ornament, but as a currency of some type, perhaps similar to the South Sea Islands of the Pacific. They were placing stucco on slipped ceramics, or they were weaving cotton textiles. We know they were making bark paper. We found the bark beaters for making paper. So they're writing on paper by 1000 BC. They're also decorating their buildings with enormous masks with unique color and shapes. And this is some of the original colors of those early buildings that have the art still in place of these enormous heads. The Olmec were carving huge heads out of basalt, and the Maya putting huge heads on the facades of their buildings. One of the buildings that we found, what is the southern part of the site, of the basin actually, called El Pesquero. This building was covered by a late pre-classic building dating to about 200 BC. But the interior had this building extraordinary detail and color with these unique heads that are on the corners of these buildings, the shapes of these buildings here. We have never seen a building of this sophistication at this early period of time. And now we have it about 700 BC, so we're aware that there's a development out here that's unique, that's extraordinary. They were placing monuments depicting deities. This is an upward-looking large boulder with an upward-looking crocodilian-type figure. They were also using altars and placing carved images at a very early period of time. We even have the evidence of kingship beginning about 600, 700 BC, where we have two kings standing facing each other, and one extending his arm with his index finger pointing to the source of their authority, which I'll talk about in just a minute with another evidence for this. It appears they're simulating the hero twins of the Popol Vuh. The Popol Vuh is a book that was found in 1700 in Chichicastenango, and it was thought to be a colonial document. It had a lot of Spanish, thought to have had a lot of Spanish contamination or Spanish influence. In reality, the Popol Vuh is a very important creation story, one of the greatest stories of indigenous cultures that we have. We also found evidence of complex writing, extraordinary texts that nobody can read. Now, we can read the classic texts. The classic texts have been deciphered. A long process of working on this, but these pre-classic texts, these texts that you find in here, incised in here, or this glyph here, or this band of glyphs on this panel here, cannot be read. It's a different system. And hopefully we'll get a large enough corpus in the future to be able to translate and understand these stories. Now, why were they settling here? All the other great civilizations of the world were on riverine systems. The Nile, for example, or the Tigris and Euphrates rivers of Mesopotamia, or the Indus rivers of India, or the Yangtze and Yellow rivers of China. All the great civilizations were on rivers except here. Now, how do we explain that? The most distant location from a river or lake. Well, those black lines that you see there are those huge tree-covered swamps that are found abundant in this area. When we fly over that with a helicopter, you can still see the fossil remnants of these ancient systems still out there. We know from the pollen data and from the isotope data that the ancient tree-covered swamps we have today look like these. They're grassy, marshy grasslands. When you walk out in them, like you have right here, it's pretty spooky because there's all kinds of snakes, crocodiles, and things that can bite you, and we're part of the food chain. So it's a little bit tricky to get in there and explore that, but they're fossil remnants of the ancient system. What the Maya were doing, however, is exploiting those rich organic swamps and building huge chinampa-like structures. Chinampas are known from the Aztec area, where they were digging the mud out and making a series of canals, and then using that rich organic mud to plant their crops. You can see how they were planting their rich productivity in their crops, and they were developing huge, elaborate systems throughout the entirety of the basin, constructing that agricultural capability. And what they were doing is mining the mud the rich organic mud from these swamps and hauling it by the thousands of tons to agricultural terraces. And they mine that mud, that rich organic mud. There's the good example of the natural soils down here, but look at the imported soils that were brought in by the thousands of tons. And in some cases, these deposits were 4 meters thick, where they had brought in, they planted the same ground for 1,000 years. They didn't have to do the milpa system where they slash and burn, plant a couple of years, and then they have to leave it and abandon it and plant elsewhere. They farmed the same piece of ground for 1,000 years by renovating their ground with just a little thin layer of mud and to plant again, to plant again, and to plant again for 1,000 years. And because of that, they developed incredible terrace systems. We have thousands of kilometers of agricultural terraces. This, for example, is a 2-kilometer stretch here, but look at the terraces that are found with this imported mud everywhere in the system. And we found thousands of kilometers of this. In our parks, we find trees, flowers, grass. In their parks, they had corn, squash, beans, cotton, and cacao. In other words, they took advantage of every square meter of available resource to be productive, productivity. And that threw them in the stratosphere, economically, politically, and socially, thousands of years before the rest of Mayan civilization caught up. And for that reason, we have extraordinary ancient cities that are found here in this area. Extraordinarily complex and early sites. Now, one of the things they learned was that you have to be able to have connectivity. And the Maya constructed the first freeway system in the world. Now, this is an image looking at one of those tree-covered swamps. But look at this line right across the middle here. That is one of the causeways. And these causeways are 40 meters wide. That's 50 yards wide in our system. 50 yards wide and 2 to 5 yards high. They're elevated. And these things were united. We have 177 kilometers of these causeways at that size and scale, which joined all these cities together in a complex web. The word in Maya for the causeway is sakbe, meaning white road. And sure enough, when we dig just below the surface, we find the surface of that lime cement highway. Now, what makes that interesting is that on a full moon night, those causeways would be lit up like a neon light. So there's a great possibility that much of the commerce, rather than hauling big bolts of corn and squash and beans and cotton, rather than hauling that in the 120-degree heat of the day, they were hauling it at night because the causeways provided a perfect light in the cool business of night to move their products and make this society function. But they also were able to transport kings and products by using those causeways in extraordinary fashion. Now, here you have an example of the size of these causeways. This is the ground level, natural ground level. This is the edge of the causeway. And here's the summit of the causeway. It goes over 40 meters and then drops back down on the other side. And you can see the width of this. Here's a person standing here on this far side, and all of these guys are standing on the causeway, clear over to this other side. This is an example of sophistication. This is an example of incredible political and economic control that we never have seen elsewhere in the Maya world at that period of time. These are just the causeways that radiate out from El Mirador. That we just found, and 6 of these causeways we didn't have any idea even existed until we had the LiDAR study. Look at this beautiful LiDAR image. I'm going to talk about the LiDAR in just a minute. This LiDAR image looking down through the jungle vegetation, and you can see this incredible 40-meter wide highway that is connecting one of the cities to another one. Now, when we look at the LiDAR maps, these are the causeways that link all these cities together. Like I said, 177 causeways. That's what we call dendritic in nature, meaning they have finger-like, where they go to a basic major site and then they go to smaller sites out. But they're concentrated in this area. They provided the unique force and it allowed extraordinary complexity to develop there. By 300 BC, they had this uniform pottery. It's all the same from the very tip of the Yucatan Peninsula all the way to Honduras. It's the same form, the same shape, the same slips, the same tempers, the same thickness, the same firing temperature. It's all the same. A standardization of pottery at this period of time. The largest pyramid in the site of El Mirador, thank you very much, and the one of the largest pyramids in the world in volume is the Pyramid of Danta, found on the eastern side of the site. This building is 72 meters high now in its current form. Originally, it must have been 80 to 85 meters high. We know that because of the stones that we found at the top of the building up in here that indicate that there were a chamber, at least up on top there, and a roof comb. These stones are massive. They're enormous, huge blocks. You can see by the individual standing here, look at the size of these blocks, and they're all placed with the long axis going into the building. So like they did earlier, they used these big blocks in which they had these walls forming in this way. But at 300 BC, they take those same blocks and they run them lengthwise into the building. So instead of one block, it took 3 to 4 blocks to cover the facade of the building. Now, there was no real architectural advantage to that, because the Maya constructed what we call cell walls inside these buildings to contain the weight. This was strictly what we call a conspicuous consumption of stone. And I'm going to show you that argument in just a minute as well. We have now built, we invented actually these polycarbonate roofs to go over and protect the art and architecture. For the first time, we can expose pre-classic art and architecture, so you can see that type of art as a tourist for the first time. We have 5,000 people a year now hiking 3 days one way to get into see these cities. That's a big challenge, but we know what the original colors of these buildings look like. We know that for example, in the World Expo in 2011, the government of China selected the Mirador Basin art decorating the Jaguar Paw Temple as the symbol for all of Latin America. And even if you were from Chile, Argentina, Brazil, you had Mirador Basin art in front of your kiosk. This is the color and shape of the original buildings. These are the shapes of the colors that they were originally. They used hematite to color those buildings. We discovered also they had elaborate water systems, pools that contained water, but were richly decorated with fine art. This is the colors that we have. And actually, we have the entire cosmos of the Maya in these depictions. We have the feathered serpent. We have the great creator god Itzamna. We have the rain god Chak, another form of Itzamna. We have the serpent ending down here with the celestial dragons. And we have these curious figures here that are swimming. These characters here are quite unique because they're dated solidly to 300 BC, and they have these elaborate headdresses. Here's his face, his ear spool. He's got a beard on, by the way. His arms are in supplicating position. He's got a belt on. There's a belt on his waist, but he's got a pad. He's a ball player. And he has one leg here, another leg here, but on his rump is another head. And this head is looking up, but the eye is closed, the nose is up in top here, but it has a red shell over the mouth. And then it has this blood scroll that emanates from the head. It's decapitated. He's got a helmet on, and then there's a little dot right there. That dot stands for the number 1. And in all Maya languages, the word for 1 is hun. So we're suggesting this is none other than Hunahpu, who was the father of the hero twins that was decapitated in the underworld in a ball game. And he was rescued by his sons, Hunahpu and Ishbalamke. If this is Hunahpu, then who is the Ishbalamke character? This is right here. And he has a jaguar. Balam means jaguar. So this guy has a jaguar headdress, and instead of a head on his rump, he has a tail. Ishbalamke, Hunahpu. Ladies and gentlemen, the Popol Vuh is an authentic text dating back to at least 300 BC. And this is a new insight that we haven't had before about this extraordinary early civilizations. We cut through the floor and discovered that the art continues below the floor, depicting important images. We've trained now 77 Maya workers to be the best conservators in the world. We brought people from the Getty Conservation Institute, from the American Museum of Natural History, from the Natural History Museum in Los Angeles. We brought them from the Louvre in Paris. We brought them from Mexico City. We brought in the best conservators of the world and trained the Maya workers to be the conservators. And these guys are outstanding. They're phenomenal because they learn quickly how to appreciate and conserve their own cultural heritage. We've put these polycarbonate roofs over many of these types of features so that they're permanently protected. You can see them today. You can walk out and understand and appreciate that. We've excavated facades of buildings. We only excavate one side of a pyramid. We leave the jungle on 3 other sides of the pyramid for 4 reasons. First of all, it's cheaper. For the cost of 1 pyramid at Palenque or Tikal, we can do 4 pyramids out here. Number 2, I can bankrupt the country just in the maintenance of all this exposed art and architecture. Number 3, we leave forests for the animals. And number 4, we leave something for the technician, for the archaeologist 100 years from now that has a technology we can't even fathom yet. So by doing this, we managed to provide something that can develop into a tourism model and something that can leave something for the future. We've exposed walls. We've exposed bedrock carvings. This bedrock carving is a unique, a very large carving in bedrock. But what makes this unique is the text on the side. And the very last glyph here says, Kuhul Kan Ahau, Sacred Lord of Kan. The original name of the basin we believe to be Kan, meaning serpent. The serpent kingdom was founded here in bedrock. This is the way that it looks. This image here is the same thing you see here. This is the way that it looked 800 years later, when the kings of Calakmul called themselves lords of Kan. Well, all this beautiful, vibrant, extraordinary complexity collapsed suddenly at 150 AD. 150 AD. They left whole pots sitting right on the floors of their buildings. They left vessels still standing. It was like having the table. We had dinner tonight, leaving the table set and walking away forever and never, ever returning. Now, there's 2 crucial words here. One's called abandonment and one's called collapse. Abandonment is always because of warfare, disease, drought, always abandonment, but they come back. A collapse is when you leave and you never come back. What this demonstrates, however, is the fragility of civilization. We live in the luxurious, the world's capital, in Washington, D.C. here. Who is thinking today that jaguars and pumas and snakes are going to be on our streets here? Nobody. But it happened. It shows you the fragility of civilization. And it shows you we have to be careful that we don't violate the things that make us great in the first place, because that has long-term and permanent consequences. Well, why did this happen? Remember that the secret to this success was that organic mud. But when we excavate in the swamps today, we find that rich organic layer under 2 to 3 meters of sterile clay. huge amount of sedimentation. What is it that would allow that type of extraordinary sedimentation of clay? Well, we begin to suspect floors, suspect lime production. To make lime, you have to burn limestone at 900 degrees centigrade temperature to convert the limestone into quicklime. And so I sent a team for 6 years throughout Mesoamerica, documenting how much wood does it take, how much limestone does it take to make how much lime cement, and discovered that it takes 5 to 6 tons of wood, 5 to 6 tons of limestone to make 1 ton of lime. And then we did the math. To cover the last phase of one of the pyramids at Mirador required the complete deforestation of 734 acres of every single living tree. And it had to be green wood, not dry wood. Dry wood burns too hot, too fast, and dies down too quickly. But green wood maintains the 900 degrees centigrade temperature it takes to convert limestone into quicklime. Well, we did all that experiment. That's all been published in these books, by the way. Those of you want to look at this Springer volume and a volume from the University of Florida Press on the consumption and experimental work we did with lime. But what the Maya did was deforest their forest on extraordinary nature to make thicker and thicker floors. Now, at 800 BC, the average floor is 4 centimeters thick. But by the time of Christ, the average floor was 13 centimeters thick, and in some cases, we had floors 50 centimeters thick. Why in the world do we need a floor 50 centimeters thick? Well, the reason is because we can. Because we could. Now, that mentality exists today. Look in Washington. Right here. We're $31 trillion in debt. And why? Because we can. But nobody's looking at the consequences of that kind of behavior. What are the consequences of that? What it tells us, too, is the Maya were human, just like us, just like the Romans. We have the same virtues, and we have the same vices. And these things are what we find in extraordinary abundance here. We also find that same phenomena in the pollen. The pollen shows the same sequence of forest and abandonments. Forest and abandonments. So we can see in the pollen record when these collapses occurred. The first one occurred at 150 AD. The second occurred around 900 AD. And then nobody was there ever since. It's been abandoned. And they were forced to leave. They had to abandon these great, magnificent, potent ancient cities. An extraordinary, bizarre, extraordinary story of humanity that we're now finding for the first time. 700 years later, small groups came back in and were living in the ruins of the ancient cities. Living in the ruins, building small little buildings like this, but painting a pottery that's quite unique. It's called Codex-style pottery. It's a cream-colored pottery with the black line on it. We've discovered some of these residences. They were also putting portraits of their deities on the faces of buildings. We have one building with 58 of these stucco heads found on one building in the late classic period, where they're trying to keep alive the ideologies of the past that were found there. Now, to understand that complexity, we were aware that there were cities galore in this area, but we had to prove it. And Dr. Arlen Chase in Belize began using a technology called LIDAR. It's a military application. The LIDAR was a system, a very expensive process, by the way, but it's a system that flies over the forest and throws out images of the forest over with a laser system. And that laser then captures, we have, this is the area that we actually map with LIDAR, the 1700. This is what it looks like when you fly over with the natural eye. But this is what it looks like when you fly over with a LIDAR. It peels the jungle away. And you can see 100% of every single pyramid, every single platform, every single causeway. It's all there in LiDAR. And we used a high resolution that throws 560,000 points per second. And we flew 158 hours shooting that many points per second. As a result, we had to process billions and billions and billions of points of data. But that allowed us to publish, just this last month, publish the results in Cambridge University, Ancient Mesoamerica. You can get online, find the article. I've got a few copies of the article back here for those that are interested. But what we revealed is the concentration and density of large and early cities that are here. This is not an artist's perception. This is the reality of what's there. This is the real image of what is under that area. And like I said, you can see every platform, every single little detail that they constructed and they built. Not only can we see the artificial landscape, we can see the natural landscape and see how they interacted with their own societies. These are the ancient cities that are all larger than Tikal, that are found inside the confines of the basin. They're extraordinary. They're large, they're huge, and nobody goes there except the 5,000 brave enough to hike 3 days one way to get in here. Now, we suggest this is worth saving. And this is, the size is extraordinary. For example, the black lines that you see here are the ancient city of Tikal. Tikal is one of the greatest sites in the world. It's a World Heritage Site in northern Guatemala. This is the area of Temple 1, Temple 2, Temple 3, Temple 4 of Tikal. But when you put it at the same scale inside El Mirador, it just covers a tiny portion of the western group of the site. There's still another 132 square kilometers of monumental architecture that doesn't even compare to this. And it's 1,000 to 2,000 years earlier in time. Now, this is extraordinary. The problem is when you get a road into these areas. You get a road in here, you get a small community established, and then you get cutting. So what was at one time beautiful, pristine tropical forest is quickly cut with a chainsaw and burned to the ground. Now this is an image by satellite on the 3rd of April at 1:30 p.m. And you can see the smoke that goes from the fires from the edge of the basin go all the way up through Houston, all the way up into Oklahoma and Kansas, up to Kansas. Now, these fires are 100% intentional. Every single fire here is 100% intentionally lit, and it's all controlled by human beings. Every red dot that you see here is a cattle pasture. Every red dot that you see. When, as of 2002, it was pristine forest, pristine jungle. The world's complaining about climate change, but look what we're doing. And who did this in the past in the same way? The ancient Maya. Can we learn from the past? Can we not repeat the mistakes that they did? Can we apply the technologies and better insight to understand there has to be a way to save this area? Well, we suggest there is. We suggest there is. The Mirador Basin is actually this area, you see the line here, that's the area that's still protected and still preserved. There's now starting to invade in this area here, but this is the future of the entire northern Guatemala unless we somehow change the models. Now, the U.S. government, in connection with several environmental NGOs of the United States, formed an area of community concessions, forestry concessions. These concessions are found in this area. We applaud them. They have detained and they have deterred some of the deforestation, but they haven't stopped it. What they're doing is punching roads in for the first time in history to get the logs out. As a result, this is what is going on right now as we speak in northern Guatemala. Just in the Carmelita concession, for example, there are 23 areas just like this in one concession, and they're massive. Deforestation, logging, the burning, the roads permit the intrusion of looters and poachers and narco traffickers and invaders. Human traffickers are using these roads to move through product to the north. This is the situation as we see it now, and this is what's going on right now in northern Guatemala. Now you can see by the color of the logs on the back of the tree, or on the back of the truck here, the different species that they're harvesting, which has a profound impact on the flora and fauna of this area. Extraordinary impact here on this material. Now, when we look at this area with an infrared, when you fly over, it looks green and pretty. When you fly over with an infrared camera and look at this image, you can see what's occurring in here. This is what is creating what we call a fragmented forest. And if you don't understand what a fragmented forest can do in the tropics, it's the kiss of death. You have 25 years and it's gone, it's dead, because you destroy the species that make it work in a detailed tropical forest. And we suggest that there's a better model. There's a better way to involve the communities. There's a better way to prevent and stop this type of thing. Like the paper says, are they Petén? The Petén is burning. And the Petén forest is dying, that nobody's doing anything. The looting is going on. These are some of the ancient cities near the communities. You can see every red dot is a major looter's trench ripping through architecture. They rip through it looking for treasures. It's a problem of survival. These people are looking to survive. How do you survive and feed your kids? How do you survive and feed your family? How do you make a nickel? And they're looting what they can. Well, in 2020, we brought 6 of the political parties, the leaders of 6 political parties of the Congress of Guatemala. We brought the president of the Congress to Guatemala. And with Congressman Weller, we approached the U.S. Senate and the U.S. Congress for a donation for the security and conservation of this area. And boy, did the crap hit the fan. Because when the mafia found out that we were looking for the security and conservation of this area, they launched a campaign against us that was so negative. This colonialist, this imperialist, this he wants to put a Mormon temple on Danta Pyramid. He wants the children of the Petén to starve to death. He wants to take away the forestry concessions. All of it lies, all of his distortions to stop the opportunity for the conservation and protection of this area. Now, if I might tell you, I grew up in this area. I was born near this area. This is in Idaho. But this is not a national park. This is a wilderness area. And as I watched this over the years, I thought, what better model? If we want to neutralize organized crime in this area, why don't we make a wilderness area and help the Guatemalans make this? I'm not going to make it. The Guatemalans need to do this. A wilderness sanctuary of cultural and natural heritage where they can protect this, and not only that, but they can involve the local communities that surround the basin in the economic models. When we go to Tikal, how many have been to Tikal, by the way? I'm just a show of hands. Yeah, a few of you have been to Tikal. How much money did you leave in the communities on the way in? You didn't leave a dime. You landed in Flores and you went to Tikal and you came back to Flores. But you didn't leave a dime in the communities. And I promise you the same thing would happen if we put a road from Flores into El Mirador. We wouldn't leave a dime in the communities. And the misery and the poverty continues. We have no solutions. But if we make this a wilderness area, then we're forced to go to these areas. Now, we applied employment for up to 400 workmen every field season. These are the workers, the families that get high-paying jobs working out here. We train them how to read and write. They work during the day. At night, they go to classes, so they learn how to read and write. We've had high-profile individuals. There's Alexander von Sachsen of Germany. There's Prince Albert of Monaco. There's Mel Gibson. We worked with Morgan Freeman. These people are interested in the conservation of this area. And in fact, John Paul DeJoria of Paul Mitchell Systems. Mel Gibson promises support for Mirador. Mel Gibson, I don't know what you think of Mel Gibson. That's irrelevant. But I will tell you this. He has done more for the impoverished people of Latin America than all the rest of Hollywood combined. Okay? A simple fact. He has done incredible things with medical facilities, medical help, and conservation programs in third world countries. That's been amazing to see. We are working with indigenous communities. It's helping them understand their legacy, their heritage. In fact, Don Mario Chach is one of the leaders of the communities of the highlands. He's a Quiche speaker. And he made it to the very top of Danta Pyramid at extreme difficulty to be able to see and be a part of this heritage. And now we have meetings throughout the highlands of Guatemala explaining all of this to the indigenous populations, including the ritual and standard ceremonies that accompany such events. We are training community guides. So the community guides are the teaching people the facts about what they're seeing. No more aliens landed here, and we have, we have the truth of the story that's taking place. We've put interpretive panels throughout all of these sites so that these people can understand what they're seeing. We put 144 computers in the schools. So for the first time, we're breaking the chain of looting and poaching and prostitution. We're breaking that chain where the kids, for the first time, are learning how to handle and write and use computers. And it's making a huge change. Working with a Rotary Club, we discovered that the people of Carmelita, for example, drink water from these two swamps. They're full of pigs and crocodiles. And what we did was we worked together with the Rotary Club of Pacifica of San Francisco. We captured rainwater, put them in huge underground cisterns, put infrared and ultraviolet filters, and guess what? We have the purest water in Carmelita in Guatemala. The best water in Guatemala is out in these areas. So for the first time, we're eliminating intestinal problems and we're providing water for tourism that they can rely on. We published books on this area. We published comics for the kids, so that the children are learning their legacy, their technology. These are books that will be coming out shortly on the Mirador Basin because of the extraordinary wealth of material that's there. Now, how do we make this sustainable so that it's accessible? Well, we can put a road in. We can put airstrips or balloons or ecological trails or bicycles, and they all have advantages. Tremendous advantages here, but look at the disadvantages. And what we discovered through a $50,000 program is that the only thing that made it possible or looked feasible was a miniature train, a small train that would not cut trees but go around them, that would take people in on the causeways. And that makes it accessible to even the poorest Guatemalan can see and understand the rich legacy that they have following these trails of ancient cities. We support the concession model, but by making products of chicle, chate, limon, bayal, copal, honey, chiles. All of this can be developed so that they're making income. Instead of logging this area, they're making a viable income. And for the first time, we have eco-lodges, we have ball courts for the kids playing the ancient ball game, we have museums and visitor centers, and we have a solution to these kinds of problems by saving and preserving one of the greatest cultural treasures on the planet. Thank you for your attention. It's great to be here tonight and appreciate your interest in this. And we'll turn the time back over to Larry. Thank you.
So, all right, we have time for some questions and answers.
My name is Al Ehrlich. I am a member of the society. I was just wondering if there's a typical size of a town, a distance between them, and a population.
Great question. We know from our experimental data that it took 15 million man-days of labor just to build Danta Pyramid alone. And there are thousands of contemporaneous structures in El Mirador by itself. So by doing that, and 15 million man-days, if one person was working, by the way, that's 41,000 years to build that. So then you do the math. We figured it occurred during the lifetime of one particular individual, one ruler, probably 3,000 to 4,000 men working for 30 years to put in that kind of a structure. However, in the basin there had to have been millions anciently, and not one person lives there today. Not one. So it's a great opportunity to save and protect the system as a system. And we think that this has a great opportunity.
Thank you.
The second question was their distribution.
Oh, the distance between the sites, yes. Now that's entirely dependent on the natural topography. They didn't really put any big architecture in the swamps, but we suspected judging by the number of utilitarian ceramics that we find out in the swamps, they may have had a whole stilt city. Residences built on stilts out in those swamps because the population was great. We've also discovered the phenomenon of hidden house mounds, meaning that you dig down 10 centimeters and you find packed earthen floors and post holes. So we know that the population was far greater than what we had assumed before. The traditional model for determining population is counting the number of visible house mounds and multiplying by 5.2, since there are 5.2 inhabitants in every modern town in Yucatan today, in every modern Maya household today. But that's wrong if you have all these hidden structures with perishable superstructures that are now no longer there.
Mostly at peace?
Mostly what?
At peace, you think?
No, they had extraordinary militaries. The great Olmec site of Levant that was sacked and burned at 400 BC. And the question is, who had enough military prowess to conquer and destroy the great Olmec site of Levanta? And we suspect it was these guys. They're the only other group in Mesoamerica with that type of political and economic power at that time to do so.
Thank you.
Yes, so before you described...
Let's stand up, tell us your name if you
sorry.
remember.
Sorry, I'm Dylan. I'm from American University, international relations student, and I'm a guest here. I'm not a member. But you described how some of these civilizations didn't have proximity to rivers, but instead swamps. So my question is, how does this novel understanding maintain or change some of these theories that involve human geography about civilization's ability to flourish under certain geographical and climatic conditions?
A great question. We know that these swamps provided the organic material. In other words, there's a beautiful lake in northern Guatemala, 24 miles long. It's called Lake Petén Itzá. Why didn't they build these big cities along the edge of that lake? He had all the fish you could want, the beautiful breeze coming across, the muchachas swimming in the water in the evening. I mean, it was beautiful as a scenario. But no, they're the most distant location because that swamp water, that swamp mud was far more productive economically for them. Now, the Maya built incredible artificial reservoirs and pools, all constructed with lime cement, all well built. Some of them still hold water today. And they designed all their platforms and plazas for water capture. Everything was designed to capture water. The angle was just right on the floors of their plazas. The buildings were designed to channel water into reservoir systems, and that gave them incredible capability to form government. You know, if we're all here and there's no water, we got to organize ourselves or we're going to die. And that creates a government. It creates an administrative centralization that allowed for public works projects like water collection systems. And that's what they did.
My name is Bruce Murray. I'm a member. I took a course in this one back in college in 1964-65 and was looking at typically the numerical and calendrical systems. Did those systems exist in this pre-classic culture?
Yes, they did.
They already had it.
Yeah, they already had the calendar. We know they were using calendrical systems, and we know that they were very astute astronomers. They were particularly oriented to solar movements more than star movements. But they're also keenly aware of the movements of Jupiter, Mars, Saturn, and Venus. They're extremely aware of that because we have certain alignments of buildings that coordinate with the alignments of those planets. So we know that they were aware of them. Extraordinarily sophisticated, even in the pre-classic periods.
Blue microphone.
Hi, my name is Erica Kane. I'm a member. I want to thank you for a great talk. The pictures and the history, it's just amazing. And so I'm kind of curious, if I wanted to go see this now, maybe not wait for the train, which I certainly hope happens, but I know it's probably going to take a while. Are there ways that you can do that? Or is really hiking through the jungle the only option? Are there any organized? Great.
No, that's a great question. You can hike 3 days one way in there with an organized tour. They have the food, the cooks, the guides. Or you can take a helicopter for a 40-minute flight and go in and see the cities and then fly out. It's a little pricey, but it's certainly feasible. And I'd invite all of you to see this while you can.
What's pricey?
Well, $2,000 to $3,000 for a helicopter.
That's trivial, right? All right, we have another question. Red microphone. Tim.
Yes, Timothy Thomas, I am a member. I noticed that there's a line across your maps in the middle there, and the civilization says stops. So I assume that's a political issue with Mexico.
Well, we haven't done the Mexican side. The Mexican border, we didn't go past the border.
And are you trying to preserve this as an international wilderness?
Yes, great question. We're suggesting that the governments of Mexico and Guatemala work together to form a binational agreement without roads and without airstrips for airplanes. The organized crime needs roads and they need airstrips. Illegal materials are not coming in by small planes anymore. They're coming in with G5 jets. Mm-hmm. And they're landing the planes and then burning the jets. Just last week, another jet landed in the cornfield, and it was left and burned. That's a $40 million plane that are burned. In other words, that's just part of business. Part of the expendable business. So yeah, it's pretty tricky. But if we work with Mexico, if Guatemala can get together with Mexico and make a binational agreement, then we have an area where all the poor people of Mexico and the poor people of Guatemala have access to the tourist. And for the first time, the poorest people of these countries are part of the economic model. They're part of the economic pie. They're the ones that'll take the people in for guides and cooks, and they're the ones that'll maintain the train if it ever goes in. They're the ones that will provide the salaries to feed their families. And that's the vision. That's the vision that we're hoping takes place here.
I'd like to slip in another question. I got the impression that you were, if that's all right, I got the impression you said that they left the pictures on the table because of lack of mud. And that seems like there's something on a whack there, that you get up and run, leaving your picture behind for a resource which must have gradually degraded.
It did. It must have gradually degraded. But it was a point where you have a perfect storm. You have, with that kind of deforestation, you dramatically alter the concept of evapotranspiration, which is when the moisture leaves the jungle, goes up and cools down, and it rains back down again. Evapotranspiration is a very real thing, and massive deforestation doesn't let that happen. The University of Alabama did a fascinating study on the temperatures of the soil in forested areas and non-forested areas, and discovered that where it's not forested, it was 4 to 7 degrees centigrade higher temperature in the deforested areas, which meant that even though the area got the same amount of rain, one area was much more desiccated than the other. And gradually, according to their model, in 100 years, most of the Yucatan and Peninsula will be a Sahara Desert, if that continues.
Blue microphone.
Caleb, I'm a guest here. I noticed some of the facial structures had bigger noses, bigger lips, some smaller noses, smaller eyes. Is there any evidence that there were different ethnicities within the Mayan Empire?
Great question. Right now, Harvard is working on our DNA. For the first time, we're providing the DNA of these groups. To date, we have no foreign influence whatsoever according to the DNA that we now have. The Olmec, for example, have broad noses, large lips, but you walk down in modern day Veracruz today and you'll see the exact same face on the muchachos in the street. So it's an ethnic DNA genetic thing that persists in local areas. But the DNA does not verify any link other than Siberia. We have every one of the indigenous, of the 12,500 samples that have been sampled from indigenous societies, every single one goes to eastern Siberia. The Bering Strait is pretty much a good clue. They may have also come by other ways, by oceanic means or other ways to get here. But that eastern Siberian link is very real.
We have a red microphone somewhere.
Hi, I'm Will Rixey, and I'm from American University, just like this guy. And I was wondering, so when the basin was prospering, was there any violence between the cities? Because I feel like it was really interconnected with all the causeways and like little to no defenses. And if it was peaceful, how did they keep the peace?
Great question. They may have originally started out as rivals, but once those causeways went about 580 BC, they linked together in a huge formation of a state-level society. And it looks like this was all collaboration and cooperation. For example, in the U.S., we didn't enter the industrial age until when? Until we put the transcontinental railroad in, right? And now we have the freeway system. So products that land in Los Angeles is in Washington in 2 to 3 days, and vice versa. It makes us a homogeneous society. Whereas if you cut all those links, we become separate, we become fractionalized, we become separate, that's when violence occurs. Now, we do find evidence of defensive walls being built at the very end of the pre-classic. When this stress is coming on them, all of a sudden they have to build defensive walls. They didn't have it when they were strong and powerful. They had to build it when they were weak and débil. What's the word in Spanish, in English? For when they were weak, they had to build these walls. So they built defensive walls. They built huge moat systems to defend themselves from potential aggressors. Look, if you've got corn and I don't, guess who's coming? You know? And that was the situation that was happening there. But that was only at the very end. During its heyday, this was all unified. And it's what we say, one of the first state-level societies in the entire Western Hemisphere.
Hello, Arvicha. I am not a member. So my question is, have you kind of identified what kind of foods and crops, etc., they grew and what kind of foods they ate? And also another question is that you mentioned that there was a collapse and then on 150 and then it kind of went on until 900, if I heard correctly.
Yes.
So did it return to the previous population levels? Just to clarify that, and how does this connect to the next stage of Mayan civilization, so to speak?
Well, yeah, the diet that they were having, we know this from isotope data, pollen data, and what we call phytoliths. A phytolith is a silicate. Every living plant absorbs silicate in the cell of the plant, and it has the shape of the cell. So when the plant dies, even the silicate cell is still there. It can be detected with electron microscopes. So we know they were raising on these fields corn, squash, beans, cotton, and chocolate. They were raising those products there. And corn and beans and squash are a pretty good diet, actually, and they did very well. Oh, and turkeys, yeah. And they ate a lot of dog. We have evidence that they're eating a lot of dogs. And we find turkey bones, we find turtle. In fact, we found pens where they were producing meat on an industrial scale. These pens held the remains of dogs and turtles. So they were raising dog and turtle on an industrial scale to feed massive populations. And it gave them extraordinary capability to keep the society active and vibrant, economically sound, well-fed, well-educated. made it possible. So what was the second question you had? You had another question other than their diet. Oh, the collapse, second collapse. Yes, great. The first collapse occurred at 150 AD. There was nobody in the basin until around 700 AD. Small groups came back in and living in the ruins. They lived there a couple hundred years. Actually, by 840 AD, we have the precise dates. By 840 AD, they're gone, and they never came back. So there were small groups living in the ruins, painting that weird exotic pottery called Codex-style pottery. You can find some in the Smithsonian here, that pottery. But that was it, you know. So there's two collapses. The one was the major collapse. The second was a minor collapse because the population was quite modest, but it still occurred.
Red microphone.
Maria Zemankova, I'm a member. Thank you very much for a wonderful talk. I was one of the lucky people who visited Tikal, and I also visited Machu Picchu.
Yes.
You made a case for more people visiting, right?
Yes.
Machu Picchu is a disaster now.
It is.
I was there when we walked.
Yes.
Okay. Now with the whatever, all kinds of things in there, I think it's really horrible. So my question really is: you painted a very good picture or made a very good case for saving the area. Are there any realistic steps, let's say UNESCO or whatever or whoever, to really help the region and help the people there?
We know that it will not happen from roads. We know that it won't happen from airstrips because that will facilitate organized crime. Okay, that's what's going to happen. This train is a simple suggestion because it's cheap and easy to maintain. The Machu Picchu trains are huge. They're like the train Maya that's being built right now in Mexico. We're not proposing that kind of a train. We're proposing a miniature train that carries 100 passengers so the Guatemalans can control how many people go in and when. Not only that, the other choice is to hike 3 days or spend the big bucks for the helicopter. Okay, but we want to make it so that every Guatemalan has the chance to know and understand their legacy, to know and understand their heritage. And the current system of hiking 6 days or using a helicopter is unreachable for most people. By using a miniature train, it's cheap, it's easy to maintain, if the communities can control it and run it, private entrepreneurs can control it and run it. There's great institutions in Guatemala that do something similar, like a group called IRTRA. IRTRA is a entertainment section of businesses. They all pay into a fund, and they have a Disneyland down there that beats our Disneyland in the U.S. It's extraordinary. But they have miniature trains that carry people in and around in this area. We suggest this is a possibility so we don't have the roads. The roads are the kiss of death, and the roads facilitate poverty, misery, and crime. Yeah. Yeah.
Rodolfo Contreras from the Embassy of Guatemala. First of all, thank you very much for your time, for your passion, Dr. Hansen. I believe you are not just a spokesperson, but you're also proposing solutions. And that's really something to underline on your presentations ever since I have the opportunity to hear you. I have two questions. One would be the quarries and the transportation method to build these structures, how far away they are. And the other one, in terms of data processing from the LiDAR flights, how many hours, how do you do it? Who provides that technical solution?
Great questions. The quarries, we excavated 6 quarries in the basin, recovered the stone tools from the quarries, replicated the stone tools, and began carving blocks to see how many man hours it takes to make one preclassic block. One preclassic block took 2.6 man days of labor per block. Then we transported the blocks. It takes exactly 12 men to move one block 600 meters. And then we started doing the math, okay, and discovered that that's how we came up with the number of 15 million man days of labor just to build the pyramid of Danta. I'm more inclined to think it's probably around 10 million man days, but if you include the distance from the quarries, it could be as long as 15 million man days of labor. So yeah, the quarries were, and there's thousands of quarries. One of the great things and one of the reasons they concentrated out in this region was because where there are not swamps, there is good limestone that they could quarry and make these huge buildings with these blocks. Now, the other question was the LiDAR. I was scared to death that a low resolution LiDAR would not, in that kind of jungle with dense canopy, would have negative results. So you can imagine my fear if they say, well, we did, 2,000 square kilometers of jungle and we couldn't get very much, but, hand over the $1 million to do it. That scared the daylights out of me. So we got the finest resolution we could get, a system called Regal. A Regal system actually made in Germany, which had dual laser system. So we got dual lasers on everything, dual images on it all. And we have 158 hours of flying between 2015 and again in 2018. And that allowed billions and billions of points that took until now to process. That's why the paper just came out on the 5th of December of this last year. And that material is all there. You can get online, look at it in Cambridge Core, and look at that paper and you'll see. And we were fortunate, it's rated now by a group called Altmetrics that has the repository and of 23 million scientific papers. And this paper is now in the top 1% of 23 million scientific papers. So we're very fortunate that people have an interest in this. It shows three things. It shows a great interest in the subject, shows a great interest in the Maya, and it shows a great interest in Guatemala.
My name's Luke. I am not a member. Who collected and processed the data? And at what point did LiDAR come into the study of this area?
All right. The LiDAR was collected by a company called Eagle Mapping in Vancouver, British Columbia. They were the only ones that had that caliber of instrument. There are other companies that do LiDAR. At that time, they were shooting and they're getting a ground return of 1.2 to 1.5 points per square meter. The LiDAR that we're getting with this instrument was allowing up to 5 points per square meter, giving a much better resolution, which is what we were hoping for. That gives us a resolution, an error of more or less 6 centimeters of error in the vertical and horizontal locations on this LiDAR. So it gave us a huge advantage. LiDAR was essentially a military technology that allowed us to see under the forest floor, see what was going on the ground. But it was adapted by Arlen Chase in Belize for archaeology, and boom, it was used in Angkor Wat. It was used in the site of Izapa on the Pacific coast of Mexico. And when I saw all that, I said, we have to do this for this area. So that's when we incorporated that. We rounded up a whole series of great donors, great sponsors that made that happen. And as of right now, we have just a few gaps on the edges of the basin that we need to fill in, and we're trying to get that work done now. So we suspect within 30 days, we'll have another plane flying to get that, to finish up just some little details on the very edge of the system.
When were the scanners?
It was started to be used we started seeing about 2011. That's when we started to see it. But the first one was used in 2013 in Belize. And in 2015, I pioneered the technology in Guatemala. Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. Let me explain who my technicians are. I have a whole series of technicians that process this data. I mean, it's not once you get the data points, you have the raw data that comes out from the company, but then you have to process that into whole types of algorithms and all types of programs that bring that data so you can see it. And you can use the hillshades, which gives you the sun at any different angle, so you can bring out detail you can't see with the normal eye. And these technicians I have do this. We have a whole team of specialists on the project that are processing that data. And we actually have a book coming out on just El Mirador alone, the 132 square kilometers of just the LiDAR of that site, so that you can see, and these are big format pages. These are pages and, huge, but you can see the detail of these ancient cities and how they were formed, how they were built, how they interacted with their local environments.
Can you post all that data online?
Yeah, a lot of that's online. We have to be careful with that, though, because this would be a roadmap for every looter in the world. Every looter in the world would love that data. So we have to be very careful with that. That's why we're going to make these books very expensive. They're going to be very expensive, and but they're going to allow the scholar to be able to look at them and interpret it and be able to use this for hundreds of years in the future.
Hi. Yes, I'm Frederica Derima, and I'm a member. Thank you for your very nice and informative presentation. You talked about DNA tracing, and you talked about tracing the lineage to Siberia. Are there any other kind of provenance, like, for example, from areas, Egypt, Middle East, Greece, and
We
so
don't
on?
have that evidence yet, no. No, we do not. There's no evidence of that as of yet. We'll see when we get this data processed now. Harvard is just getting that material now. We had to go through all the government regulations and processes to get that material exported. Now, DNA is a tricky stuff when it's 2,000 to 3,000 years old.
Right.
It's very tricky.
Right.
And we're relying heavily on molars because the internal part of the molar still may have the DNA we need. Now, there's another part of the story I never told you in this talk, but we have evidence of a battle on top of Tigre Pyramid about 400 AD. And we have skeletons on that where they were slaughtered, these people on this pyramid. And there were probably only 100 people in the whole city at that time, but they were probably members of the royal family. So that's why that DNA is crucial to help us understand who these people were, and it'll start establishing the royal lineages that were still in existence there. And that those molars are crucial to get that kind of DNA.
Yeah. Can I ask a follow-up question? Yes, the DNA is kind of tracing back to thousands of years, very hard, and so I'm glad that there is a little bit more hope on that. The reason I'm asking is because there is a kind of a similarity in architectures, for example, the pyramids and many other things. One of the pictures you showed looked to me like Knossos in Crete. So this similarity may be, of course, the art develops or the structures develop or the shapes, and many thought of this idea, but maybe there is a connection.
Well, that's always, you have to keep an open mind. But what's amazing to me is the similarity of the human mind. Yes. For example, the Hohokam of Arizona, the ancient Hohokam made the swastika. Were they Nazis? Of course not. But we're wired to do somewhat the same symbols. We're wired to produce somewhat the same results. And so what it shows is that we're all in the human family together, and we're kind of wired genetically to think certain ways and to produce things in certain ways. A pyramid is the only real way to get an elevated structure and have it be reliable. And so even though these pyramids are not like the Egypt ones, which are strictly funerary, these were functional as well. They have stairways. They have rooms at the top. They had chambers and activities taking place there. So there's a lot of differences too. It's not only the similarities, it's the differences that make the difference and show the rich nature of human complexity and human culture.
We're going to take just one or two more questions. I think we have, Jerry has his hand up here. Let's take red microphone there, and then we'll take the blue microphone there.
Jerry Weller, I'm a guest, and my question is, Dr. Hansen, all the images in your publications tend to have everything is red. And right. So the question I have is the choice of colors that the Mayans used.
Yes, great
and
question.
What were they trying to communicate with that choice of colors?
A lot of people go into the idea it must have been for sacrifices and whatnot. No, hematite is iron oxide ore. Iron oxide impedes the growth of moss and lichens and mushrooms. So as a functional reason, you paint the buildings with hematite and you have lot less maintenance on the building. It was a functional project where you don't have moss and lichens and mushrooms growing on in a very humid environment. It was a logical way to control the color. We have pyramids that have blue colors. We have pyramids that had just black and black on cream color. The black was a charcoal mixed with clay. The cream is derived from an orchid called rubunium. And the red is iron oxide, ore that was imported from Baja Verapaz, about 250 kilometers away, imported on their backs. And one of the questions was about transport. How do they transport this material? They did it with what we call the mecapal system, where you have a band across your forehead and you have a basket on your back and you're carrying your bag of your bulto. I keep wanting to say something in Spanish. Your bulto, your burden. That's it. So they were transporting all this stone and all this material without the use of a wheel, without the use of any kind of wheel vehicle whatsoever, and no beasts of burden. The only beasts of burden were human labor, which is why when you look at the labor expended in the construction of these buildings, it's one of the greatest human stories on the planet.
Last question. I think the blue microphone.
Yeah, I have the blue one. Hi, Muriel from Mexico. I'm not a member. And kind of on the side of the science and politics, I'm sure that you have seen changes from the past year, since you mentioned already El Tren Maya, that it's been, crossing by Campeche, and also this other program called Sembrando Vida, which tried to look for more forest in the border, especially with Guatemala. So have you seen those real changes in these past years, and how that can impact the research that you're doing on the field? And just a quick other question there. If you can elaborate a little bit more on the Olmec image that you showed, that it was like,
Yes.
just that. Thank you.
Yes, the Train Maya is a very ambitious project proposed by President López Obrador of Mexico. And this train is, I just saw it 2 weeks ago, and this is a serious project. The question is, what's better for the environment? A single train or 300 diesel-spewing buses and trucks every day, spewing diesel fumes and diesel exhaust into the atmosphere? Which is better for the environment? In my opinion, I think the Train Maya is a solution. I don't agree with how wide they're making it. I think you could do it a lot less width than what they're doing it now. But this is a serious venture, and I applaud the Mexicans for a visionary. Whether it's right or wrong remains to be seen. But they have a vision, and they're proceeding ahead, looking to the future. That's the issue there. The Olmec plaque was found in a garbage pit. Now, all the other Olmec items that we find in the Maya world are always placed in ceremonial contexts. The fact that this is in a garbage pit suggests there's more to the story. There may have been a romance between an Olmec and a Maya, and something happened, and she threw the pendant into the garbage pit. I mean, something like that is more to the story. So we don't know. I'm just saying that this was in a trash heap, and it was perfectly preserved. Nothing wrong with the Olmec plaque. But the fact that it was there shows that there was an interaction between those two societies. Now, Olmec cities are oriented north-south axis. The early Maya cities are an east-west axis. So they weren't, you can't say that the Olmec were the mother culture of these Maya. They were a sister culture of the Maya, and that these guys were evolving simultaneously, looking and aware of each other through trade and exchange perhaps, and copying some of the features. The use of jade, for example. The use of copal. The word for copal is poem, which is a Mijesoque word. That's a word, that's an Olmec word. But the Maya are burning poem. Okay, they're burning copal. So there was things that were adapted and adopted by each civilization on both sides of the area.
And with that, let's thank Richard for spending time with us. Before you go, we have a couple of small presents for you. One is a framed copy of the announcement of your talk, signed by all the members of the General Committee on behalf of the membership. And so you can take that with you.
Thank you very much.
And then, more substantively, we have a signed copy of Bulletin of the Philosophical Society of Washington, Volume 1, covering the period from March 1871, when it was founded, to June 1874. And it has why the society was founded, who the founders were, who the original members were, and why it's called the Philosophical Society of Washington, instead of the Science Society of Washington. They didn't have the word science back in those days. And the interesting presentations that were made to the society, because it was like the Royal Society of London at the time. And people really did come and make presentations, and they didn't have dinners, and they didn't have a social hour. They had to wait for the Cosmos Club for that kind of stuff, which was founded mostly by members of the Philosophical Society. You can also find in here how to calculate the value of pi to 30 places.
Thank you to the, thank you. Thank you, PSW, for your support, for the invitation, and the great honor of being with you this night. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you so much. And before you go, we have a few closing remarks, of course. The next lecture will be the 2473rd lecture on March 3rd. The speaker will be Andrea Ramirez. She is the Chief Data Scientist for NIH's All of Us research program, which aims to collect a lot of biometric data and genetic data on 1 million people who will be in the program, plus more than that. So she'll be speaking on the All of Us program and the challenges of managing genetic, biological health, lifestyle, and environmental data on over 1 million individuals collected regularly for at least a decade. It'll be the most comprehensive database of health-related information ever assembled, and will pose many challenges and opportunities in data management. The 2474th meeting will be on March 17th. The speaker will be Walter Harris, Chief Scientist at the University of Arizona Space Institute. He'll be speaking on comets, centaurs, and trans-Neptunian objects, exploring the echoes of formation in the outer solar system. The 2475th meeting will be on March 31st. The speaker will be Jonathan Losos, Director of the Living Earth Collaborative and Danforth Distinguished University Professor at Washington University. He'll be speaking on using experiments in nature to study evolution, research on lizard island adaptations in real time. So he's been studying how lizards evolve when introduced onto islands where they not previously found and have no similar lizards to compete with. We do not have a speaker as yet for April 14th, but we will be announcing that at a later date. The 2477th meeting will be on April 28th, and the speaker will be Amanda Puldani of Cal Poly. So Amanda's written a whole bunch of books about ancient Mesopotamian life, and she'll be speaking on that, particularly on the lives of ordinary citizens or citizens of people at that time that have been deciphered from reading ancient cuneiform tablets, of which there are a lot, and most of them have not been translated. The 2478th meeting will be on May 19th, This will be the annual Joseph Henry Lecture. The topic will be building habitat on the moon. The speakers will be, at the moment, Daniel Innocente, who is the senior space architect at Blue Origin and a former PSW speaker. And we have a very funny typo here. It says it's the senior space architect at Blue Apron. Sebastian Esprella, who is the CEO of Think Orbital. Eleanor Morgan, who is a space architect and program manager at Lockheed Martin. Xavier Zestelier, who's space architect and head of design at Hassel Architectures. Melody Yashar, who is a researcher, technologist, and director of building design at Icon. That's the company that prints concrete buildings with a gigantic machine that spews out concrete and then builds up layers. You can see how that might translate to building things on the moon. And Paul Kessler, aerospace technical manager at NASA. So we'll hear from each of them individually for 15 or 20 minutes, and then they will share the stage in a panel for the Q&A session. The 2,479th meeting will be on June 2nd. The speaker will be Sean Carroll. How many of you know who Sean Carroll is? Excellent. He's a well-known physicist who has published many books on theoretical physics and gravitation, including textbooks and popular books. And he's done a TV series, too, if you want to see what it looks like before you come. So I think it's a great courses. So he'll be speaking on, he's currently, actually, he's been at Caltech forever, but he's not at Caltech anymore. He's now the Homewood Professor of Natural Philosophy at Johns Hopkins, and also on the fractal faculty at the Santa Fe Institute. I assume he'll be talking about something in contemporary theoretical physics. And the 2,488th meeting, which will complete the spring lecture series, will take place on June 16th. The speakers will be Bill Merrill and Sam Brody of Texas A&M University, and they'll be speaking about a very, very large infrastructure project estimated to cost about $30 billion called the Ike Dike Project that is being planned around Houston to control rising tides and water surges. And that will be it for the spring, and so please check the PSW website for up-to-date information on our meetings. Before we go, let's thank tonight's crew: Cameo Lance, Robin Taylor, Robert Thompson, Jared McQueen, Bill Mitchell, and I guess myself. Bill hasn't done anything yet. Bill is the editor of the video, though eventually he will. So by the way, speaking of crews and those who make things happen, we could really use some additional hands for people who want to help out with the video. If you have, incidentally, YouTube streaming and Zoom expertise, please come see me. If you're interested in running a camera or helping with room management, please come see me or see Robin, who's hiding back there behind the TV. We would love to talk to you. Really could use some additional hands here and some expertise. And if anybody wants to help us pack up tonight, please see me. It's a lot of stuff to schlep back. All right. With that, I think I will accept a motion to adjourn the meeting. All right, take a second. Anybody here opposed? All in favor? The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for coming.